Good evening again, everyone. All those joining us on YouTube for our Wednesday night Dharma talk, and those joining via Zoom, part of the socially engaged Buddhist training. Um, I have the great pleasure and honor of introducing Bill Debuys, who is a local and a friend and a member of our Sangha. And I've actually am remiss that I've never had the pleasure of hiking the Himalayas with Bill, but I know that Roshi and Noah and Wendy and many others have. And part of the last journey they were on together was alchemized into a book that is released later this month. It's Bill's 10th book, which is somewhat stunning. And it's called The Road or the Trail to Conjuroba, Rediscovering Earth in an Age of Loss. And just a little bit about Bill's background. He's a neighbor to Roshi up in the mountains at Prajna. He's had a ranch there for many decades and is a conservationist as well as a writer. He's had many different kind of postings as a conservationist. He's been a distinguished visiting scholar at the Library of Congress, a Kluge scholar. He's had a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Lyndhurst Fellowship, and was also, and this was really impressive when I first heard it, he was also the chair of the Via Caldera Trust, which, if you don't live nearby, you don't know the Via Caldera probably, but is this expanse, this 89,000 acre expanse of stunning land that has been kept in trust for some time now. And he administered that for a while. And the one thing I'll add about you, Bill, I don't know if you know this, is that we went on a walk up at Prajna, and Willow, my dog, was still a pup and kind of incorrigible and speedy and would jump on everyone and go between trees, and we couldn't keep her calm. And Bill called her an unguided missile, and that was her nickname for the rest of her puppy years. So Bill, it's wonderful to have you in the Zendo. It's a treat for us, and it's all yours. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you very much, Kozan, for that introduction. And, when someone gives a talk, it's typical to say, thank you for having me. Well, today I really, really mean that, because I'm grateful that you've allowed me to come into the Zendo today. I know there are all kinds of restrictions and complications with COVID and so forth. And it's just great to be here talking to human beings instead of a screen alone. But I want to say to everyone out there in the ether, it's great to be talking to you as well. Coming back to Upaya is always feels to me like a little bit like coming home. It's just such a wonderful place to be and a place to learn and grow. The other thing that people do at the beginning of talks, and I'm doing it, is to thank the people who make the talk possible. And in this case, it goes beyond the usual dimensions of that kind of gratitude. A gigantic thanks, I see you up in the corner, Roshi, to Roshi Joan Halifax for giving me the opportunity to participate in 2 Nomads expeditions in Dolpo, one in 2016 and one in 2018. These were life-changing experiences for me, and also enormous literary opportunities, which I pray I've made the most of. Noah and Wendy were on those trips. Ang Mo, who is one house away or so, was on those expeditions. Other people who are no doubt listening in may have been on that, and I want to extend that thanks to all of the nomads What a great community it was to be part of. And I learned so much from everyone on those trips. So thank you, thank you. So I'm going to talk about this new book, which is, as Kozan said, just about to go out into the world. It's like sending your kid off to college or something like that. You know, you hope you've done the right thing and that this new being, this new thing will have a good and productive life, and you just have to send it out there. And there's a funny thing about this book business. You spend years writing a book, draft after draft, teaching yourself, always imperfectly, how to say what you want to say. And inevitably, the big payoff is that if you keep at it, eventually you realize that you've said things that you didn't know you had it in you to say. That's the good news. The bad news, at least for an introvert like me, is that once you've finished the book, you have to learn how to talk about it, which is a little bit oxymoronic, because if what you had wanted to do is talk, maybe you would have made a podcast or a TED Talk or stood braying on a street corner. But you would not have sat at your desk alone week after week and month after month making sentences. So here I am, come to talk to you about this book and to confess that if it were easy to talk about, I would not have written it. I would just have said it. And I would say it now, except that it took me 4 years and 211 pages to get as far as I did. And the thought of compressing the gist of all that into something tidy makes me feel worse than inadequate. But here goes. First, the book is the third part of a trilogy. A decade ago, I did a book on climate change. It was called A Great Aridness, Climate Change and the Future of the North American Southwest. And then shortly after that, in fact, I left on the expedition for the next book, I think the day that the final copy went into the publisher on A Great Aridness. Next, I did a book on humankind's war against wildlife, and that was called The Last Unicorn, a search for one of Earth's rarest creatures. So now I am come to the third book of the trilogy, which is this one, and it asks, when we know what we know about our mistreatment of Earth, how do we keep our heads together? How do we keep doing the work to save what we can and also save the best aspects of ourselves, if not our very lives, in the process? It comes down to the question of how do we not lose heart? And if you turn that question around, it means how do we keep our hearts? And how do we keep committed to the cause of caring for our planet? And how do we keep ourselves from growing numb or cynical or any of 1,000 flavors of crazy, which you can see in the news almost every day, even when those news articles about fires and floods and ocean currents and extinction and so forth are so consistently bad? How do we keep our hearts when the prospects for what we think of as success have become thinner than hair? This is the problem I carried when I went to Nepal with Upaya's Nomads Clinic in 2016. And I doubt if I need to tell anyone here about the Nomads Clinic, but just for the sake of completeness, it is a project of Upaya. Its expeditions are both medical missions and pilgrimages. The clinic is the brainchild and the heart child of Roshi Joan Halifax. The expeditions deliver health care to remote regions of Nepal, in communities that are ethnically Tibetan and culturally probably more authentically traditional than perhaps any other communities now surviving in Tibet. To return to the problem, the problem of botched earth care is global. But for me, and I suspect for many of you, perhaps all of you, it's also personal. Here are a few lines from the introduction to the book. My work has taken me to badly disturbed environments where losses are high and prospects for improvement slim. But most of these places have also overflowed with beauty. They have fundamentally changed how I see the world. Studying the climate system has had a similar effect, revealing the complexity of the natural world in new and deeper ways. These experiences have been like arrows from a peculiar kind of Cupid, deepening my awe and my love for the planet. And this enchantment, in turn, leads to a paradox. These are more lines from early in the book. My delight in the beauty of the natural environment must coexist with grief at its destruction. These emotions are like cellmates who cannot get along. They dwell in my head and my heart, and their constant argument creates a moral ache, piercing at times, that frequently sours the taste of life. Skipping ahead just a few sentences from that passage, the text continues. We tell ourselves that for the sake of future generations, we must leave the world at least as good as we found it, and then we don't. Or at least most of us don't. We foul what we have inherited and diminish its beauty. Many of us are hardly sensible of this dereliction, yet I know that the grief I feel is not particular to me. I pray that walking will help. And so I went walking. I went walking with the Nomads in Dalpo in 2016, and then returned with them in 2018. And it took the second trip to make sense of the first one. Because when everything is completely new, as it was for me in 2016, my senses become so overloaded that I am nearly as oblivious to what's really going on as a dog watching television. So I had to go back the second time to understand the first one. And both trips were marvelous in more ways and at more levels than I can possibly describe. I think both times we walked somewhere around 140, maybe 150 miles. We were out for 4 weeks or 5 weeks, something like that. It was long enough to become really settled in the life of the trail, which is part of the book, one of the main themes of the book. But in the interest of full disclosure, I should tell you that the book is not just about the Nomads expeditions. Its Himalayan story is intertwined with two other stories, which recount the origins of two powerful scientific theories: the theory of natural selection and the theory of plate tectonics. These theories fundamentally altered our understanding of Earth. But why build them into the book? Well, there's a second paradox that I want to tell you about. Thanks to those two theories, one in the 19th century and one in the 20th century, we people alive today occupy a bizarre and stunning historical moment. For the first time on Earth, and probably for the first time in a very large neighborhood of the universe, conscious life, that is to say, us, can tell itself the true history of its planet, of its world, and of the development of its own species. This has never happened before. And we can do that without resorting to magic. It's a true story. Think of it. We, those of us here on this planet today, can tell ourselves the biography of Earth, and within that biography, we have pretty well sketched out the chapter that is us. Plate tectonics, the second of the two big theories, was fleshed out in the 1950s and 60s. So I realize I am more antique than most of you. Roshi's and my generation, we were kids back then in the 50s and 60s, was the first to grow up with this point of view, with the point of view of plate tectonics and all that it led to. And it led to things that we're hardly conscious of. This wonder-filled understanding exists, however, in a context of rather bitter irony. Even as humankind has acquired this near omniscience, we are well advanced in destroying the creation of which we are a part. So this ironical paradox is also part of the starting point of the book. Another big thing I can tell you about the book is that in the end, I actually found what I was looking for. I didn't know I would when I started out, but I got where I thought I needed to go. I actually got answers to my questions. But right now, right here, I can't tell you what those answers are. And this is not some cheesy spoiler alert. I really mean it. The lessons don't fit into sound bites. They work their way into you. They add up and become coherent only in the course of the journey that produced them. And the book is the distillation of that journey. And I hope that people who read the book will be able to arrive at those same answers through the experience of the book. I try to summarize those lessons in the very final lines of the book, which actually took form in a hotel room in Kathmandu, where Roshi was going around the room after the 2018 expedition and asking each of us to comment on what we had learned, how we felt, where we were, checking in at the end of our 100 and some mile trek. And I said almost these exact words, and they're the last words of the book. Every day a yatra, and yatra means pilgrimage in the Himalayan world. Every day a yatra, every situation a clinic. Absorb the beauty, build an ark, be alive. Those are just 16 words. That's the whole book in 16 words. But to unpack them, you have to take the journey. The trails of Dolpo are the journey. The clinics we held, the people we treated and learned from, the service we tried to render, the exhaustion we felt, the beauty we beheld, the camaraderie we enjoyed, the hardship we witnessed, all that is part of the journey, our life on the trail. That's what I've tried to pack into the book. It's a book about hope, but not a simple kind of hope. It's a book about finding your way, but only after losing it. It's a book about Earth's beauty, not as adornment, but as nourishment. It's also a book about science, but not the science of power and control, rather the science that swings open the gates of wonder. It is a book about extraordinary people, the Dolpopa, and the cheerful stoicism that enables them to live in one of the most demanding environments on planet Earth. And it's a book about that environment, the backside of the Himalaya, pressed hard against the Tibetan plateau, where spaciousness, difficulty, and inspiration travel parallel paths toward infinity. I'm going to read a passage or two to share that journey. And the first one sort of develops that theme of every day a yatra. It's partly about what one can learn from life on the trail. And I'll confess, it is probably the preachiest part of the whole book. So if you are allergic to preachy books, just know that this is as bad as it gets. So we're coming down from one of the high passes. This is early in the story, about a third of the way in, I suppose. Ahead and behind, people walk in small groups, which gradually string out, breaking into threes, twos, and ones. I usually prefer the ones. It is good to walk alone, to match freedom of movement with freedom of thought, for the presence of another person can be constraining, even in silence. One wonders how that person is feeling, whether he or she is tired, hungry, or wants to rest or talk, but doesn't say so, lest you do not. Or perhaps you want to pause and just look at a far horizon, or wander into a ravine and take a leak, or walk especially slowly or rather fast. And what would the other person think about that? Such thoughts are noise. Solitude is less noisy. There will be plenty of time in camp for conversation, plenty of time to hear everyone's news and enjoy the pleasure of interaction. But in the meantime, the trail is a place to strip down and shed the unnecessary. At home, it's so often the reverse. Clutter abounds. So much of our lives centers on the things we own and consume. At a societal level, we even tell ourselves to measure well-being through GDP and similar indices by the volume of the things we purchase and the rate at which we do so. More is better. Faster is better too. To say otherwise in the political sphere is apostasy. In order to maximize the buzzing of our economic hive, we submit ourselves to a bath of urgings. Signs, screens, and the amplified voices of strangers exhort us to buy food and drink, clothes and contraptions, and to ally with one company to fatten our wallets and another to slim down our waists. On the trail, we towel off from the bath of urgings. The din goes silent and sounds of place arise. We take mental as well as physical steps. Toward what? The options are profuse. We construct our thoughts from what is before us and steer our course according to weather, terrain, and other stern conditions. Within those limits, paradoxically, we enjoy great freedom. Every day on the trail becomes a kind of pilgrimage, a yatra in the language of the Himalaya. Pilgrims are people who journey towards sacred goals. And what lies nearer the sacred than an understanding of how to live and for what? Such freedom includes responsibility. On the trail, we render assistance to our fellows, should they need it, and we strive to stay in good form. We must avoid getting hurt, which besides being unpleasant, imposes burdens on others. And so we walk alertly, mindful of our step. We find the pace that is right and keep to it. I will confess to walking like an old man, slower than most, but steady. This is also how a Sherpa walks. Although slow for a Sherpa, looks fast to me. One keeps moving, which is not a bad metaphor for most situations. I think about this as I age, that the only way to keep moving is to keep moving. A scrap of reasoning no less true for being circular. And so we move down the trail, you and I, with the goal of moving mindfully, aware of our step and aware too of our companions ahead and our companions behind, and of others whom we may meet along the way, any of whom may need our help as we may need theirs, which amounts to a pretty fair metaphor for other, larger journeys. So now I have to change my glasses, I realize, and put on my reading glasses. And some of you who are on the trail with me may recognize leukotape on the ends of my glasses. Leukotape is the best remedy for blisters on the trail, and it also is a pretty good thing for fixing eyeglasses that a puppy has chewed. I've got to make a decision on the fly here. I think we do have time. I'm going to read one more little piece about being on the trail, and then I'm going to read a piece about one of the clinics. So this next piece is, again, just about me. But most of the book is not just about me, I just want to assure you. But this connects, again, to more of that theme of everyday, a yatra. In fact, it is an episode in the book that is titled Yatra. The long climb up from Shiman, which Govinda, one of the muleteers, took at a lope, is for me a metronomic trudge. Step upon step, breathing hard, I think only of the act of walking. With amusement, I realize I am still learning to walk. I am learning, for instance, that I must walk slowly enough that I do not need to rest. At the right pace, my lungs and legs work in synchrony, and I neither gasp nor feel weak. If I stop longer than a few seconds, I lose my rhythm. It's as though my lungs and legs leave their posts, go on break, and refuse to come back. And even when forced to resume their duties, they resist working together. The trick is to keep them at their jobs. Like the tortoise that raced the hare in Aesop's fable, I need to stay in motion. Old Aesop must have walked up many a mountain. I am lightheaded near the top of the climb. My trail mates sprawl on rocks, their packs beside them. And here comes a family of villagers, mother, father, and young boy, headed down to Shiman. In Dolpo, upon encountering strangers, you bow slightly. If your hands are free, you might bring them together in a gesture of prayer, and you say, Namaste. It's a simple word, but profound in its depth. It roughly translates as, I bow to the divine in you. By contrast, our English hi and hello have no more meaning than marks of punctuation. Each member of the passing family says, Namaste to me. Namaste, I say back, and their bright smiles continue to shimmer in my mind's eye minutes after they're gone. I probably need to drink some water. This morning, Tenzin spoke in our circle. As usual, his delivery was staccato and epigrammatic, more poem than paragraph. Tenzin's gift is to mix the cosmic with the trivial. Stop. Take view into you, he coached. Absorb mountain. Eat later. More important than snack bar, than granola bar, is getting blessings from our journey. He paused, looking around the group to gauge his audience. Every day a yatra, he said. A yatra being a religious journey or pilgrimage. All we have been through, you will feel this. you will feel lighter, I think. Such lightness, I imagine, would render one indifferent to whether the trail climbed or fell, whether the distance to go was long or short. Such lightness might even enable the resolute pilgrim to round a bend and say, Namaste, and mean it to any other creature, be it saint, songbird, or snow leopard. On this day, alas, I cannot tell my lightness from my lightheadedness, but perhaps, if I keep walking, eventually I might. So, enough about me. I want to read an excerpt, probably not the whole episode. This book is composed, by the way, of 61, not chapters, I think of them. I think of them as just episodes. 61. It's a concession to the age of ADHD and the short attention spans of everyone who spends time with the internet and all the rest of this stuff. Anyhow, those short episodes were also enabled me to weave together the stories, not just of the expeditions, but of Darwin's discovery of natural selection and the parallel story in the 20th century of the discovery of plate tectonics theory. So anyhow, this is an episode late in the book. It's one of the last episodes I wrote, and it's derived from a day on the 2018 expedition. And I know some of you, Wendy in particular, and Ong Mo, will remember this day, and Roshi as well. It's episode 53, titled Clinic Notes. No one gets out of here unchanged. The lessons of the clinics are never far out of mind, and the agents of change, more often than not, are the patients. At one clinic, a paralyzed young man crabbed sideways past the triage table into our cluster of tents. His mother walked beside him. He moved horizontally to the ground, with one unbending leg stuck out as stiffly as a tree limb, and the other cramped beneath his body. His calloused fists punched the earth in alternation so that he swiveled slowly across the barley stubble. Prem assigned him to Michael Lobatz. One of our guides, Michael Lobatz was the neurologist in the clinic. One of our guides, Dawa Sherpa, a mountaineer who has summited K2 and Everest, led him to the specialist tent and waited with him. The young man's predicament recalled a passage from the Snow Leopard. Heading west from Pokhara toward Dolpo, past the last of the roads then existing, Matheson and Schaller passed a girl, quote, dragging bent, useless legs. Perhaps in his description of the girl, Matheson had in mind to foreshadow the crippled lama he would meet at Sakang. Perhaps he meant only to record what he saw and what moved him. His words have moved many readers since. Quote, nose to the stones, goat dung and muddy trickles, she pulls herself along like a broken cricket. The sentence stops me cold. No phrase better evokes the cruelty of the world than broken cricket. Yet the image also sets the girl at a distance, away from the reader, which is the way most of us witness grave misfortune. At the clinic, the young man with the pretzeled body, broken though he was, did not seem broken. His gaze was warm, his eyes clear. Later, when we met in circle, Dawa said that when she looked at him, he did not flinch, but looked back openly and softly, revealing a deep calm. Dawa is no stranger to sacrifice and trial, and she said that the gaze of the paralyzed young man moved her deeply. There was a lot of beauty there. There was a lot there. Michael Lobatz also spoke. The young man, he said, was about 20. He had suffered a stroke within months of birth, and his paralysis and deformity were the result. Michael thought that with injections of Botox to release frozen muscles, together with a program of physical and occupational therapy, the young man might literally get on his feet again. This boy, he said, probably has normal intelligence and could have a reasonably normal life. Michael's voice tightened as he labored to say, he could be more than a crawling person on the ground. The words came out high-pitched, strangled. We waited a long moment for Michael to gather himself. Arrangements could be made in Kathmandu, he said, his voice regaining its tone. Michael explained that he had discussed the possibilities with Dr. Sonam and with the young man and his mother, who solemnly thought the matter over. Lobatz admitted being stunned when the mother politely declined. But her choice was clear, and her son seemed wholly in agreement. There was no reasonable way for him to be brought down from the heights of Dolpo to a road where transport might be procured. Even for the able-bodied, such a journey entailed days of walking. And the medical interventions the mother foresaw would transform her relationship with her son and alter the balance of their lives together, which they cherished without resentment. No one had to explain that when the mother died, perhaps not long in the future, the son would die too, for there would be no one to take care of him. That was simply how things were. I'm going to skip a little bit toward the end of this passage, this episode. We're skipping the discussion of another case. In the afternoon following this particular clinic, we sat on stools in a circle beside the tents, a chill settling like dew with the waning of the sun. As ever, the little black crows called chuffs spun and squabbled overhead. The reports and observations continued. There was talk of malnutrition among pregnant and nursing mothers and among the very young. Mild distensions of the belly had been noted in a few cases, but subtler problems were no doubt widespread. Dr. Sonam said that deficiencies in vitamins A and C and possibly other nutrients were probably typical for children of the region. The conversation shifted to diagnostic quandaries provoked by our patients' other ailments, the pervasive joint pain, dizziness, gastritis, general weakness, and recurring migraines. There was laughter when someone pointed out that Prem and the triage nurses must be losing focus. They had long since taken to writing whole body in the space for complaint on a majority of intake forms. There were expressions of thanks. Ang Mos in particular, who said that without the kindness of her grandmother and others, she would be trapped in the same toilsome life endured by her patients in the women's tent. And there were tears too, including Wendy's, when she reflected on what those women had to go through, the drudgery, the continuous pregnancies, the shunning associated with menstruation. And there was satisfaction as well, and not just from the provision of analgesics. Michael Lobatz described a mother's relief when he told her that her child's migraines would get better. He said doctors are never more fortunate than when they can provide the gift of hope. The differences between patients in Dolpo and patients in the US attracted frequent comment. One doc said that most of his stateside patients were what he called the worried well, people whose anxieties outweighed their physical problems. Don't get me wrong, he said, a lot of people need intervention, and to provide that is very satisfying. But the practice is not like here, where you think at least that you're having more impact. His friend and colleague from Colorado said it was the gratitude and resilience of the Dolpo Pa that impressed him most. They come in with joint pain, a blown out knee, GI distress, a horrible rash, whatever, and maybe we can't help them. Sorry, we say, we wish we could do something for you. And they get up and smile. They say, that's fine, thanks anyway. And off they go, as cheerfully as they came in. Patients back in my clinic are so different. Whatever hurts them becomes so much bigger a thing. And we give them meds for blood pressure or pain, but they really seem to want us to fix something bigger than that, something we don't have meds for. They want us to fix the pain that's in their mind or in their souls. My Nepali patients have lots of problems, but not that one. So that's what I have to offer you today, people. And looking at the screen here, with my eyesight, I can't really recognize people very well. There was a rumor that Prem might join us from Kathmandu. I hope you're out there, Prem. I love you. I wish I could see you again. And I wish you the well as you soldier up to COVID in Nepal. And I'd like to say thanks again to everyone who has joined this little gathering and listened to me for the last 45 minutes. So thank you all, and namaste.
Thank you, Bill. I know Roshi is unmuted. Roshi, did you want to say a few words?
Bill, it just brought our service and the spirit of it and the spirit of the people and of the landscape so strongly back to me. And I also want to say that this book is coming out just as the report from the United Nations, from the IPCC, where I think many of us are reading that report and feeling the kind of despair, solastalgia, that has disabled many people of all ages across this planet. And the book gives, I feel, having read it several times, thank you for allowing me the preview. And it's not just about the Nomads Clinic. I have to say, the way you portray Darwin's life is just mind-boggling. I mean, it's jaw-dropping. And also bringing the history of the plate tectonics, you know, and our different relationship with time. And that is one of the critical things that I experienced year after year in returning to the Himalayas, how time collapses into being, that it disappears separateness, and that you become one with the trail. The other thing I want to say, that reading the book,
What happened? Was that it?
something just you just disappeared. Oh my God.
You're back.
Now you've reappeared. There you go again. It could be a weather.
It's probably just the connection to the camera, because I think they can hear us. They're still on.
Okay. You know, the other thing I wanted to say, Bill, is that first of all, traveling with you was because you're such an amazing observer, not only of humankind, but of this earth, but also that we experienced And I know it so intimately that this experience of pilgrimage and service is truly a rite of passage. And when you have reflected the transformative nature of this experience in terms of our own, those of us who travel together and what we went through and the difficulties that we encountered, combined with the encounter with peoples who have extraordinary resilience. And it changes one at a cellular level, that the petty complaints that drive us to consume and also to undermine the human spirit, which has brought, so much sickness, not only to people, but to this earth. One has a complete for me, I won't say everyone goes through it, but it is a revelation. It's a cellular and spiritual transformation that comes from being on a landscape that is so raw and so high and so unforgiving that actually forgiveness is revealed in that direct experience. To share that with you, and with now it's hundreds of people who have served in the clinics since 1980 and brought, goodness into that Himalayan world. But actually, the goodness is not equal to the goodness that we receive from those whom we encounter. And your book reflects that in such an extraordinary way. So I'm just, it's filled with wisdom and surprise and mystery, and also great humility, the kind of imperialist attitude that round-eyed people so often bring into, and colonialist attitude, into the experience of connecting with the remotest areas on the earth. Really it's so raw, it's stripped away through what we know in that experience. So I just thank you with all my heart for capturing it. And I feel that the book will be a manual for guiding us into this next phase of encountering this catastrophe that seemed imminent, but rather distant. And now it is upon our actual shores. Fire, as you say, flood, famine, refugees, millions upon millions of climate refugees, and many of us, or our children or grandchildren, will become those too.
Yeah.
Thank you, my good friend. And
Thank you.
for those of you who don't know, we live in two watersheds. Bill and I share two watersheds, the Trampas River watershed and the Rio Grande watershed. Both of those rivers run, in our, right down our shared valleys. And to share those sacred watersheds with you and to continually learn from you, Bill, has been a privilege. It is truly for me what social engagement is about. It is about bringing wisdom and compassion together, and you do this as no other person does. I thank you. So I just, we're going to move now into the connection with our community, our socially engaged community, for a period, just for back and forth with Bill. And I just want to thank the almost 200 people who are on YouTube for joining us, joining Bill. And please, we put in the chat stream, you can get a signed copy of the book from Collected Works. You don't have to get it from Amazon. And I encourage you to get it and read it. It is an extraordinary read, Bill, and totally surprising, page after page.
Thank you so much. Yeah. One thing I'll add, by the way, is that if the book has good qualities, they're partly there because Roshi is a very good editor. And guided me past a few pitfalls and also helped me shape up the ending, which resisted me for a long time. But finally now it's my favorite part of the book. So Roshi, can't
Well,
thank you enough for all of that.
I will, we should probably say a little bit, just a tiny bit. I got to the end of Bill's book, and I know that feeling of moving from Ringmo, down to Denai. It's like, oh my God, you're dropping in altitude, and your spirit is kind of collapsing step after step, and your morale is following your spirit. And I dinged Bill on reflecting that experience as the ultimate experience. I begged him to look again. And we had many conversations, not to make something good out of it, but actually to make something wise out of it. And you did it. You brought it home.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you again, Bill. And I just want to pause for a moment because I know our community on YouTube is with us, and we're going to end that portion of tonight with our Mahasangha. So thank you for joining us. I hope you'll join us again next week. And for the Hidden Lamp, if you're interested, this weekend, ongoing series